A week since January 1979, Dan wrote a column on a sprawling range of topics for the Baltimore Sun. At 46 consecutive years, Dan's column might have been the longest-running local column in the country. Before he retired in January 2025, he had written more than 6,600 columns for Sun readers. In addition to the column, Dan was, for many years, a local radio host and television host. And he was the creator and host of the Sun's first podcast, Roughly Speaking. He is the author of 3 books, including Father's Day Creek, Fly Fishing, Fatherhood, and The Last Best Place on Earth. In recent years, Dan found his way into writing for the stage. His first play, Baltimore, You Have No Idea, has had 3 runs to sell out audiences at the Baltimore Museum of Art's Meyerhoff Auditorium. A second play, Baltimore Docket, premiered in February 2024, also to sell out audiences. His new play, No Mean City, Baltimore 1966, will open at the VMA in March 2026. Tickets now on sale. Speaking tonight about 1966 and other topics from that rich season in our history is our special guest, Dan Ruck.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for inviting me here. It's kind of cool to be asked to speak to the Historical Society. I spent a lot of time in this area of Moncton because of the Gunpowder River. This is where I learned to fly fish, on the Gunpowder River. If you don't mind, I prepared some notes and actually a little bit of a talk tonight, so I'm going to use this, if you don't mind. So right down the road, Falls Road here, you go to Corbett Road, and there's the Corbett Road Bridge over the Gunpowder River. And about 30 years ago, it was actually 29 years ago, I went out to fish, and I was in kind of a blue mood. I wasn't feeling that great, and fly fishing for me is like it's cheaper than going to a shrink. So I go fly fishing. So I was down at Corbett Road, standing on the bridge there, just looking at the river, and I heard a car approach. It was a silver Toyota Crescent. A large man in a polo shirt at the wheel. I took him to be in his late 60s. He was handsome in some aging movie star way like Cesar Romero. He stopped the car and got out. A big barrel-chested man with wavy white hair and a sense of playfulness about him. He stepped toward me and pointed. You are Sicilian, he said. He had this sort of big boom box of a voice. And I said, no. That my mother's people were from Naples. My father was from Madeira, the Portuguese island off the coast of Morocco, closer to Africa than it is to Portugal. Good enough, the man said. Naples isn't far from Sicily. And Sicily and Madeira are both islands. Now, once this guy was satisfied that we were somehow kindred, he shared some personal information in all in the space of the next 60 seconds. He told me that he was from Sicily, that he'd been a union truck driver, that he was an exceptional cook who made great spaghetti and meatballs, that he taught singing. Cantors were among his students. And that he loved opera, and that he had quite a set of pipes, and I like to hear him sing. And he did not wait for an answer. This big, jolly man gathered his breath, spread his arms, right there on the bridge, Corbett Road Bridge. He closed his eyes, and there on that summer day, he started singing to me. To the sky, to the trees, to the river, to the sun. He sang in French. The baritone part from Au fond du Temple Saint. Bizet's The Pearl Fishers. I recognized him. He switched to Italian and sang Non pendrai Fafaro Namoroso, which is the bass aria from Mozart's The Marriage of Figaro. And I'm standing there holding fish. This was no singing in the shower voice either. This was a professional operatic voice. And my God, there was flashes of bravura in his performance. And we were standing on the bridge over the Gunpowder River, and here's this man with this rich baritone singing to a stranger out of pure and utter joy, as if his heart would burst otherwise. It seemed to me that nothing in the world could ruin this man's day. And that he knew the answer to life's inevitable blues lurked in some deep place in the soul. Find that thing that makes you happy and call it up and never let go. Find that thing and use it every day. If you don't use it, you lose it, he said. And that was what he had to say about his singing voice. This man turned out to be Casper Vecchione, something of a legend among serious singers and students in the Baltimore region, known for his big voice and his big personality, a Renaissance man who drove a truck. Casper was Sicilian and an immigrant, the son of a bootlegger, a student of the Peabody Conservatory of Music, veteran of World War II, and a prisoner of war. I can still hear Casper singing on the bridge. I thanked him for singing the blues away for me on that summer day, just down the road. Plug my book. So that story is in this book, Father's Day Creek, which I wrote a few years ago. And I always think of Casper when I visit this area, Moncton, when I go fishing in that river in this area. I also think of the landowner down Falls Road who was unhappy with people kayaking and fishing in the Gunpowder near his home. So he set up an archery target on the opposite side of the river, and he relished firing his arrows across the river over the heads of people and kayakers, and sometimes people fishing. The state police paid a visit to that gentleman. We never heard from him again. Anyway, thank you again for being here tonight to hear what I had to say, because the topic at hand is this play that I've written for 2026 for next year, the third play that I've written about Baltimore. So I'm going to just read you, because I wrote some things this afternoon. I think it will come. It's called No Mean City. And it's taken from the title of a book that Mayor McKeldin wrote called No Mean City, which is his pain to Johns Hopkins, Enoch Pratt, and George Peabody. And it's actually pretty well written. He speaks about these men in glowing terms because they were, in addition to being businessmen who made a lot of money, they were philanthropists and cared about their city. And that's what turned McKeldin on about them, and that's why he devoted this book to it, No Mean City. With the permission of his family, I've taken that title, and when you see the play, I hope you'll see the play, it's explained why the play has that title too, and where it comes from. But it tells stories about the city that have long been overshadowed by the biggest thing that happened that year, which was the Orioles beating the Dodgers 4 straight to win the World Series in 1966. It was the first World Championship since Major League Baseball came to Baltimore in 1954. But its significance to me transcended sports, coming as it did in the midst of the Civil Rights era. As if conjured in the cosmos, rather than through an off-season trade, 2 men named Robinson, Brooks and Frank, one white, one black, led the team to the top. And I think that's just an amazing thing that sometimes we overlook. They both had the same name. One was white, one was black. It was the middle of the Civil Rights era, and they turned that team into a championship. You could say that 1966 actually started for Baltimoreans on December 10th, 1965, because that was the day that it was announced that the Cincinnati Reds were trading Frank Robinson to the Baltimore Orioles. Frank was 30 years old. He was an all-star. He was the most valuable player in the National League. People in Cincinnati said, "What the hell are you doing?" The owner, the general manager of the Cincinnati Reds was a man named Bill DeWitt that they came to call Bill Dimwit. If you ever watch the movie Bull Durham, there's parts where Susan Sarandon narrates it's voice over, and she refers to this as the worst trade in baseball history because of the way it turned out. It turned out great for the Orioles, not so great for the Cincinnati Reds. That was December 10th, 1965. One of my sources for this play has several books, and I'm going to tell you about the Baltimore Sun's role in this little bit later. One of the books is Integrating the Orioles, a very good and well-sourced book by Bob Luke, who writes in it that the struggle to integrate baseball in general, and the Orioles in particular, mirrored the fight for civil rights that intensified throughout the country following the end of World War II. Integration of the Orioles, as was the case with many teams, came slowly. The breakthrough came in 1966 with the arrival of a more enlightened owner, Gerald Hofberger, his front office staff, and African-American superstar Frank Robbins. Now, when I arrived in Baltimore to work at the Evening Sun in 1976, some of the veteran reporters I worked with there had covered the 1968 riots following the assassination of Dr. King in Memphis. And though the assassination sparked the fires and lootings and marked the beginning of a long period of struggle for the city, I always wondered what Baltimore was like in the years just previous to 1968. So by 1966, it turns out, civil rights leaders had been pushing for equality across the city in public accommodations, in hiring, for a long time. And they had the help of this progressive Republican mayor. Imagine those two words again. Progressive Republican. Theodore Roosevelt McKeldin, who was determined to keep Baltimore from collapsing into the unrest that had befallen other cities in 1965 and 66. In 66, the Congress of Racial Equality, with a new leader named Floyd McKissick, declared Baltimore the most segregated city in America and made Baltimore its target city for demonstrations and for political action that summer. Why was Baltimore picked as a target city? It's a southern city with all the aspects of the northern ghetto, said McKissick. There's no other city like it. It combines most of the worst features of old-style southern segregation with the complacency, indifference, and de facto segregation prevalent in the north. McKeldin was willing to cooperate with CORE, was taken aback at this characterization of the city, and took umbrage for himself and for other Baltimore civil rights advocates at the suggestion that they had not been working on equality issues for years. McKeldin had. McKeldin had been mayor in a very interesting political career. He was mayor during World War II. Then he became governor for 2 terms in the 1950s, and he was well known, then he came back, and he was mayor again in 63, or he got elected in 63, and he was, older man by then. He was well known for, as a supporter of civil rights, going back to his days as governor. And in Baltimore in 1966, he and his allies, white and black, fought for open housing. McKeldin went around and made personal appeals to bars. He was a teetotaler, but he went into bars and spoke to bar owners about discriminating against black citizens. He spoke to restaurant owners, hotel owners, apartment building owners, asking them to stop discriminating. They had just passed the Civil Rights Act in 1964. Let's catch up, fellas. He managed to get 17 clubs on the block to allow black customers. So all the strip joints stopped discriminating. So in doing this research, I spoke to the mayor's last press secretary, Hirsch Goldberg. He's 85 years old. I went to his home in Pikesville, and during a long conversation about the kind of man McKeldin was and how he dealt with CORE, how he dealt with the Ku Klux Klan that came to town to fight open housing, how he dealt with the American States Rights Organization that sent a virulent white-hot racist to Patterson Park to basically had white supremacist rallies in Patterson Park, and things were heating up. So the conversation with Hirsch was all about that. Toward the end of the conversation, Hirsch says, the mayor got a call from LBJ while I was sitting there one day. I said, well, what was that about? Well, Lyndon Johnson had been elected in 1964 president of the United States. And Theodore McKeldin had endorsed him over Barry Goldwater. And Baltimore was a much bigger city then. It had 940,000 citizens in it, and LBJ felt very indebted that this big city Republican mayor had endorsed him over Goldwater. So he wanted to offer the mayor a job. And the mayor had a job, he was mayor. But the job was mayor of the District of Columbia. And so I said, are you kidding me? So I looked this up. You know, the District of Columbia had a 3-member commission overseeing the city until 1965 or 66, when LBJ decided it should have home rule, you should have a mayor and city council. And the president got to appoint the first mayor of the District of Columbia. So he calls Theodore McKeldin. And I knew from previous research that you could go to the LBJ library and hear telephone recordings. So I looked it up. And sure enough, hello, Mayor. Yes, Mr. President. Listen, I could really use your help down here in Washington. There's a whole conversation with LBJ trying to talk Theodore McKeldin into leaving his job in Baltimore and becoming mayor of the District of Columbia. The next conversation is McKeldin calling him back and saying, I'm sorry, I have an ulcer, my wife doesn't want me to do this, thank you anyway, and he turned down the job. But I thought, this is a very interesting history, isn't it? So McKeldin, worked very hard for open housing all through that year. The city council rejected open housing. Old Cardinal Sheehan made an appeal to a large gathering of people in the War Memorial and was booed. They booed that old white-haired Cardinal Sheehan, and actually there were some reports that he was spat upon, too. And I had a very interesting thing that happened to me here while I was doing this. Well, I finished the research, I've written a play, and we've cast the play. And just 2 weeks ago, I discovered something that affirmed for me that I was onto a good story here. The Baltimore City Historical Society gives an annual award for outstanding history, outstanding written history, and it's named after Joseph Arnold. And this year they gave it to a local historian named William J. Thompson, for his essay entitled Theodore R. McKeldin and Baltimore's Long Hot Year. And when this was brought to my attention, I hurriedly looked to see, what's the long year he's talking about? I hope it's my year. And it was. It was 1966. So here's a guy, I didn't know that Mr. Thompson was working on this, but he's on the same territory that I've been on, and we're doing research for this play. Because this play is different than the previous 2 plays. The previous 2 plays are all about my own experiences as a writer in Baltimore, getting to know the city, learning about the city, covering trials, and all that stuff. This is more of a conventional play where, I look at facts and as much history as I can, and with some theatrical license, put a story together for 90 minutes on stage. This is what Mr. Thompson wrote. He said, Theodore Roosevelt McKeldin was one of Maryland's most significant and colorful political figures. He was arguably the most important Maryland Republican of the 20th century. He was the last GOP mayor of Baltimore and the first Republican re-elected as governor of Maryland, first one. During his 2 terms as mayor, elected in 1943, elected in 1963, and 8 years in Annapolis, 1951 to 1959, McKeldin was known in Maryland and nationally for his advocacy of civil rights. And I don't know, there were some Republicans who voted in the Senate for the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. They stood out. This was a day when there were such Republicans existed. He writes further, he said, for McKeldin, no year presented him more challenge than 1966, a time when in the aftermath of the Civil Rights Bills, cities in particular were facing white backlash combined with an increased militancy among African American activists, which threatened to undermine progress and public support for black equality. An important flashpoint in the continuing civil rights struggle in Baltimore was open or fair housing. 1966 was also the year that a wealthy Baltimore County businessman, a Democrat, who probably should be described as a Dixiecrat, George Mahoney, ran for governor. He had a habit of running for governor, and he also ran for Senate. He was sort of a gadfly, but kind of a very smart man. However, his campaign theme in 1966 was, "Your home is your castle, protect it." And he split the Democratic Party with this, it's a pretty loud dog whistle, racist dog whistle. He was driving around the state of Maryland with a van that said, "Your home is your castle, protect it." He was appealing to property rights, the people who felt that the Civil Rights Act went too far. And that you should be able to sell your house to whoever you want to, that you should be able to discriminate if you wish. And so that's what Mahoney did. And he split the Democratic Party. So that I would say the rest is history, except I shouldn't say that. I should explain what happened. A bunch of Democrats, a lot of Democrats, in the general election went over to the Republican side and voted for the Republican candidate, Spiro T. Turpitude Agnew, the Baltimore County executive who became governor of Maryland and was governor of Maryland for maybe 2 years before Richard Nixon selected him to be vice president of the United States, and he continued to take payoffs in the executive office building almost right up until the time they caught him. So anyway, the rest of the purpose is here. I came to rely on the Baltimore Sun archives from 1966. I read day after day after day the reporting on this episode in the life of the city. Okay, I think I've exhausted myself. All right, that's my main talk. Yeah, actually, I'm missing a page of it, but I still don't know what happened there. It's probably a poem stuck in my computer in the printer. Yeah.
Maybe Annie ate it.
Also, one other thing about maybe my dog ate it. One other thing about McKeldin, he was very big on the Inner Harbor. Before shipping, he actually gave, in his inaugural speech in 1963 in December, he talked about turning the Inner Harbor into a tourist destination. It should be this glowing, beautiful place. The old industry is going away. We've got to do something there. And people thought he was crazy. But he actually, this is the other part. So Johnson was a little disappointed that McKeldin did not agree to be the mayor of Washington, but he got back to him with $18 million to get the Inner Harbor started, meaning to clear up the old docks, to do some cleaning, some infrastructure work to get that started. So McKeldin Square is called that for a reason, because he's the one that got that started. And then later on came Harbor Place and all of that. So, anyway, any questions? Anybody?
Yeah.
Yeah. Where are you? Oh, hi.
The Kelvin Alexander families get along, given they were.
Your story. Yeah. So there was young Tommy, who was president of the city council when McKeldin was mayor, and they worked together on open housing because young Tommy was in favor of that, but they lost. They lost 3 votes in the city council before it passed later on. They were together on that, but then McKeldin did not run again. He could have run again, but he decided not to because he didn't think he'd have. He could beat young Tommy D'Alessandro, and young Tommy D'Alessandro ran and won that year. But I think it was a cordial understanding. Also, McKeldin, Hirsch Goldberg told me that McKeldin went to the Sun editorial department to see if he could get the Sun's endorsement, and he didn't. He came away thinking he wasn't going to get it. That the Sun was going to endorse younger man Tommy D'Alessandro. Of course, Tommy only lasted 1 term because he had the riot in '68 and felt, well, it was very hard on him because he had done a lot of work in the city in neighborhoods that ended up burning. It's terrible. So anyway, yeah, they got along until the mayor just decided I've got to step out of the way. Yeah. Okay. Anybody have any question, please? Yes, ma'am. Yes, right there.
Do you know if the Sun paper won any Pulitzer prizes during that period?
I'm trying to remember. There was a gap in years when they didn't win Pulitzers. I don't think so.
Just curious.
Yeah. When I got to the Evening Sun, we won 2 Pulitzers in a row in the '70s. one for science writing and one for a new category called explanatory journalism. And then the Morning Sun won some pieces won some Pulitzers in the 80s and 90s, and we won. The last one we won was in 2020 or 2021 for coverage of Healthy Holly. And if you remember Mayor Pugh and the Healthy Holly books, yeah, we all had a piece of that story. Yeah. So and of course, Ann Tyler won a Pulitzer Prize for a novel. Which one? Dinner at the Homesick Restaurant, Accidental Tourist. Which one? Was it Accidental Tourist? Yeah. So when she lived in Homeland, and when she won the Pulitzer, a reporter went to her door to get a comment from her, reaction to winning the Pulitzer Prize. And Ann Tyler said, I can't right now. I'm in the middle of a paragraph. Yeah. He actually gave public statements, angry public statements about the way Cardinal Sheehan was treated during this big town. It was like 2,000 people in the War Memorial. That was one. But with this guy named Connie, his name was Connie Lynch, and he wore plantation ties like Colonel Sanders, and he had a coterie of young men with him, all in white shirts with these plantation ties, and they had a platform. First they had a platform in Patterson Park, and then they had a speaker set up at a truck out on the street, and there were fights that broke out. Some white guys went up north to Montfort Avenue and actually started beating young black guys, and black guys were being chased around during this stuff. It got out of hand. So the mayor asked the city solicitor to get an injunction. And at the time, the local TV stations they were shooting film of this. So the film was entered as evidence, and these court hearings came about pretty quickly because the mayor wanted fast action, and they got an injunction to stop it. So he was going to have a third. This guy, Connie Lynch, you can look him up. He was really ugly talk. I mean, and I was surprised that the Sun reported word for word what he said in the paper. And I was really surprised.
Pulpit on this issue of civil rights?
It's a very interesting question. I wondered about the same thing too. How Frank was when he got here, and that's a whole part of my play too. Frank and his wife trying to find a house in Baltimore, and Hofberger stepping in to find them a house, and where they found them a house. That's a good story by itself. That's part of the play. But Frank told Hofberger that he admired the civil rights leaders. He admired Dr. King and all of them, Fannie Lou Hamer, all of them. But he said, that's not me right now. I just came here to play baseball, which is my way of, being a presence at this time. And then later on, he became more outspoken. I think when he was a player after the Orioles, and when he became a manager, he was certainly outspoken. He wrote a whole book about racism in baseball. Yeah, I got to talk to his daughter up in California and his wife. I didn't speak to his wife. I spoke to the daughter, and they were very excited about the play. I don't know if they're going to tell me or not.
Yes. What can you tell us about the relationship between Brooks and Frank?
Oh, well, Nichelle, not Michelle, but Nichelle Robinson, his daughter, refers to Brooks as Uncle Brooks. So that tells you something, right? And they had lots of conversations. They were side by side in the clubhouse. And Brooks is very interesting because Brooks was from Little Rock, Arkansas. And Frank was really well aware of what had happened in the Little Rock, when they had to bring in the First Army, I think, the airborne, it was the Army. What year was that? 57? I can't remember. Do you know that Brooks signed with the Orioles when he was like 18? And then he was playing for them in September? He got out of high school and he was playing for them in September? I mean, it's amazing. But no, they had a good relationship all through that. One thing Frank says is that Brooks would invite him out to dinner with the players if they were on the road. Frank wouldn't always go, but Brooks would always say that. And he does say in the book that the players all got along, he said they all got along great, he felt very accepted by the Orioles right away, because they knew this is going to be the difference, right? Frank's going to get him a World Series. But they didn't. I think they didn't spend a lot of time outside of baseball together. Frank says in the book, but he says that's partly me. He says because I'm just kind of shy. People don't think I'm shy, but I actually was not that much of a social bug. So I didn't go out with those guys as much as I wish I should have. And he says that in the book, one of his books. He's got 3 books. Yeah. So yeah. It sounded like it was a very good relationship. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Rodricks, noting your comments about the core of journalism, do you think online newspapers are observing, if you will, the core of journalism? And do you think the Baltimore Banner is doing a good job?
Well, on the second question, yeah, I think the Banner is doing a good job. My only wish is a regret. I wish the founder of that, Mr. Bainham, the philanthropist, I wish he had purchased the Baltimore Sun. That would have saved us a lot of trouble. But they don't have, what the Banner doesn't have is the sort of what bothered me. I started seeing news in story selection and the way stories were written skewed toward some agenda that was really bothering me. So that's the Sun. I think the Banner does do a good job. They have a big staff. I hope this nonprofit model is sustainable because, I understand they're paying people very well. It's okay. I'm glad they're making good money, but you got to sustain it, right? And I hope their readership sustains it, and they hope they get advertising to keep it going. But online, I think online is good. I've gotten used to reading online. I still read the New York Times in print on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. But the rest of the time I just read online. I read all kinds of stuff online. Yesterday I spoke to some Morgan State University journalism students, and their class is devoted to sourcing material for journalism, determining what's credible and what isn't. And there's so much junk out there. You really need to teach students. They need guidance on what's credible and what isn't. I told them about a story that I just finished writing for the Baltimore Brew, which turned out to be a very involved story about a city neighborhood. And I started I didn't start with Wikipedia, but I went to Wikipedia to get started on sourcing for this story. Like, what's the history of this neighborhood, right? But even Wikipedia, I trust it. I mostly trust it. But I want to look at the sources that it cites. So I go to the little footnotes, the little, where it says number 2, number 3. I click on that, and I was saying, okay, where is this coming from? It's coming from a book that was reviewed by the New York Times. This is a book, So you got to sort of work a little harder at that now, because there's so much clutter, so much junk, really. Sometimes I'll get a letter from librarians at the Baltimore Sun they were mostly women, and they did an incredible job. They would clip out stories out of the paper and fold them in such a way that they fit in these little envelopes. It was like origami with the Baltimore Sun. This is how we used to do it. And we had this giant, if you can imagine this giant machine that was like a giant card file. Huge. It was 2 stories high. And they would push a button. So if you went in there and say, give me something on the Baltimore City Fair 1976. You ask that because every time I go into this, I revise the script a little bit here and there because of what's happening today. It's influencing the prose that I write in the play because, I think the average person will watch this play and be thinking about what's happening today compared to what was happening then. It was pretty rough back then, and I don't know that there was a great breakthrough, was there? McKeldin worried about the city becoming smaller. He saw what was happening. If you look at the population figures, Civil Rights Act, 1964. Well, you can go back even further to Brown versus Board of Education. I once went into the Baltimore Sun Library and looked up census figures. And it was uncanny to me that starting in 1954, Baltimore's population started going down. The same year, I said, it's going down. It was level for many years. It started going down after the Brown decision. And by the time McKeldin was mayor the second time, the city's population was like 939,000. You know, it's below 600,000 now. The city lost 120,000 between 1970 and 1980. Now that's a lot of running away, right? So, I don't, you know, you get to the end of this story and it's not, and the Orioles win the World Series. Thank God something good happened, because it was a rough year in Baltimore. So, anyway, yeah, and what's happening now? I mean,
It's a rough year.
yeah, it is a rough year. I don't, the obsession with DEI, rolling back DEI, intimidating universities and other institutions about their DEI plans, I mean, it's completely racist to me, completely racist. What else can you call it? I don't,
Gentleman
so,
over here has a question.
yes, I'm sorry. Yeah.
AI, how do you weave in what's happening with the unregulated artificial intelligence?
Yeah.
Today was an example of it. ChatGPT has put together a video of political people,
Yeah.
all yelling racial epithets, and you couldn't say them out. It looked so real. It was in
Yeah.
it was in the Times today. But it's
Yeah.
oh, gee.
I know, it's, you gotta be skeptical about it. I see it, when I do I'm searching for information for a story, and AI, you know, pops up, answers my question. So that's a good starting, again, it's like with Wikipedia, it's like, to me, it's just a starting point. It doesn't mean, and I told this to the students at Morgan yesterday, you start there, but you really gotta check things out. If your mother says she loves you, check it out. That was a newspaper slogan I learned a long time ago. The other one was don't predict indictments or deaths. And what's another one? Believe nothing until it has been officially denied. Yeah. And now you believe nothing, right? Yeah, right. Yeah. And one time, I don't know, I'm sorry, this just popped into my head. One time when I was a young reporter in Baltimore, and I was covering City Hall and William Donald Schaefer was the mayor. He was upset about something, and they sent me into his office to ask him a question. And I standing there with my notebook and my pen, and I'm like 21 years old, you know, and every other word begins with F. You know? I don't know how to quote the guy. And then it was the same year I was doing some investigative reporting about a federal investigation of city corruption. Actually, this was contractors were bribing a guy who bonded contracting companies. They were bribing him to bond them, even though they weren't really qualified to be bonded. So I went into his office, and I can't remember his name. I said, "Sir, well, they say that you're under investigation for taking bribes to bond companies that are not eligible or qualified to be bonded." And I said, "Do you have any comment?" He said, "Sonny, if that's true, I'll let you kiss my ass, 42nd Street, Times Square, and I'll give you 20 minutes to draw a crowd." Mr. Kaiser denied the allegation. It's always fun being a young reporter. City. Yeah. Sorry, yes, sir.
Returning to the AI
Yes,
question.
please.
All these large language models are trained on the words that have been written before.
Previously, right,
Yeah,
yeah.
and those are your words, lots of them.
Could be, yeah.
Over the years
Yeah.
that you've produced, and all the ink and all the shoe leather that you put into those words.
Yeah.
Do you feel any kind of way about them being the basis on which these large language models are built?
Well, I think it's a good thing if it starts with a credible source again, right? You know, how to make a white bean puttanesca. You know, puttanesca is instead of with pasta, with white beans. They gave me like 3 or 4 options. It was great. Sorry. I know a lot of former prosecutors. I know some people who worked at DOJ until a few months ago. Retired FBI agents now. I know they're all just appalled at this. This is not the way. This is happening in open. It's happening in plain view, and it doesn't seem to be anybody doing anything about it, right? It's because Trump controls the Department of Justice, right? So it's not like the old days. It's like right out there in front, and who's going to ride in and do something about it, right? I mean, the people that I first knew, I covered federal court for I don't know 3 years before they made me a columnist, and the people that I knew, FBI agents, IRS agents, assistant U.S. attorneys, DEA guys, took their jobs very seriously and worked discreetly. It was very hard to figure out what they were investigating and who they were investigating, unless somebody who had gone before a grand jury told you what. That was the only way. It was very hush hush, and then they would issue an indictment, and usually the feds issued an indictment because they had somebody. They didn't usually fail with their prosecutions. But those people that I met, those men and women who were, especially the assistant U.S. attorneys, they were performing a public service, and they took it very seriously. And there were people too who I followed in their law careers after they left the U.S. Attorney's office, and there were people with integrity, people that I respected. You call them up and ask them a question about some aspect of the law, and they give you an informed, educated answer, right? I don't know, they're driving people like that away, right? When's that going to come back? Carol again.
Yeah, do you have any concerns about blacklisting?
Blacklisting.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like it's happening.
What do you, blacklisting
In
of
other
whom?
words, they're gonna come after you, you're on a blacklist,
Oh,
you can't speak.
I would wear that with pride if they did that.
Oh,
Is
right.
that right? Am I on, do you know something? Do you know something? I don't know, I wonder about that. Well, you saw what the reporters who covered the Pentagon did.
Yeah.
I was very proud of those guys. Tom Wallace,